Welcome to the Healthcare Hot Seat with Tina D. Badham and Lori D. Owens, where the people who keep healthcare moving and the people who depend on it finally get a seat at the table. Take your seat. The conversation starts now. Welcome back to the Healthcare Hot Seat, where real conversations meet real solutions. Today, we're talking about something that touches families everywhere. Whether you're caring for aging parents, supporting a loved one that's recovering from an illness, or navigating your own mobility changes, we are diving into fall prevention. And we are joined by someone who has made it his mission to help people stay safe, confident, and independent. You know him as the Fall Doc on Instagram, among other platforms. But behind the name is a clinician, educator, and advocate who has centered that platform around fall prevention and safety. John Thompson is here with us today.
John has created a community by breaking down fall risk in a way that's accessible, honest, deeply practical for everyday people. Patients, caregivers, families. He's known for his clarity and his compassion, and then his ability to make fall prevention feel doable instead of overwhelming. Today, we get to explore the why, the how, and what now behind his work.
John, welcome to the hot seat. We are so glad you're here.
It's great to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So, John, you have built such a strong voice and presence around fall prevention. What originally inspired you to start this journey and focus your work in this direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I got out of physical therapy school, I initially worked in outpatient physical therapy and treating a lot of low back pain, knees, necks, things like that. And then after a couple of years, I switched to home care, and it kind of blew me away, just what I was seeing every day. Number one, just how many patients suffer falls that never even make it to the outpatient facilities. And I think just over and over, just seeing this, I couldn't believe it was happening. And you look into the statistics, which are pretty mind blowing. In the US, 14 million older adults over 65 are falling down every year, 3 million ER visits, which comes out to like one patient every 11 seconds going to the ER. And I realized, especially if you look online, there's not a ton of information around this. And I think the stuff I was seeing from the huge accounts on social media, a lot of what they talk about is these super in-depth strength training program for women in their 30s and 40s and 50s, but not that much addressing people in their 60s and 70s, especially women who are prone to hip fractures, of course. And I just kept seeing that, and that's kind of what got me started and going down this whole path here.
That is amazing, John, and very much needed. As I shared with you before, you definitely hit home with my sister. So I applaud your platform, and it has definitely been meaningful for her. When you look back on early stages of your career, what experiences or realizations made you want to start educating people, not just clinicians, about the fall risk?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the big thing is that a lot of this stuff can be pretty simple, and there's not a lot of that out there. If any of your listeners are familiar with people like Peter Attia or Andrew Huberman, they have very in-depth stuff, and they touch upon hip fractures and osteoporosis and how to change that with strength training. But a lot of it seems so overwhelming, and even to someone like myself, who I've been into fitness my whole life, I've been training patients and clients for the last 15 plus years. So I really wanted to find a way to just make this stuff a little more reachable and a lot more doable for people that, you guys are in home care, that are in their houses, in front of their TV most of the day. They're not getting out to the gym. They're not listening to podcasts. They're not on YouTube, staying up to date on all these things. So, but they are on Facebook, they are on Instagram, they are scrolling TikTok, and they can do super simple, easy exercises to get stronger, avoid falls, and hopefully ultimately keep them out of the nursing home.
Absolutely. And I think really you kind of answered my next question in that, about how your early experiences shape the way that you communicate. And obviously you've kind of come to that realization that those platforms that are out there now are kind of the go-to and the way to communicate with people on the in the masses. So thank you. You kind of answered that next question for me.
And your platform has grown incredible. You have a huge following. So, has your perspective on your role changed as a clinician or educator or advocate? And how has that evolved?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that I think, especially with short form social media, a lot of people see me as almost kind of like a motivator, but it really just comes from breaking things down and keeping it simple, which I think we're going to hear again and again and talk about. And it's not even really that I'm trying to be some crazy motivator, but when people think you need half an hour in the gym or an hour long spin class, or you need to join a gym membership or go walk at the track for 3 miles every morning. And I'm just telling you, hey, if you just do 20 or 30 squats every day, sit the stands from your chair, super simple stuff like this, which hopefully we can get into a little bit and help some of your listeners, that can make a huge difference in your life. So I think the big thing is number one, people see me as a motivator, but it's more just that I'm trying to let them know that as they get old, doesn't mean they have to get weak. They have to suffer falls. They have to go this route that happens to so many people. And they can just do a little bit and offset all that.
Absolutely. And we do want to dive into what you call those hidden contributors to falls. So I'd love for you to, give us some feedback on that and what top factors you're seeing is being missed.
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people, I think, when they think about falls, they think it's, oh, I just fell. It was just bad luck or just random. Or I just slipped on ice one day. But it's really not that random. So a lot of it comes down to number one, strength, and number two, just like reactive balance ability, we'll call it. And people just think, oh, I have bad balance or I have good balance. But a lot of these people are just thinking about their ability to stand on one leg. And no matter how good you stand or how good or bad you stand on one leg, that doesn't really matter when you're walking down the street and you trip on a roof or you trip on a curb or a raised sidewalk. So I think the two big things that people should think about and that people too far often don't think about is number one, strength. So can you get up and down from a chair? Can you get off the toilet? Can you go up and down the stairs? Because if you can't do these basic things, then your whole day becomes a fall risk. You're going to fatigue easier. Basic ADLs, as you guys are familiar with, are a lot more difficult. And just living a normal life is difficult if you don't have that base level of strength. And then from there, the other big thing is reactive balance. So how quickly can you move your foot and can you train yourself to be able to move when you have something in the street or you trip on your rug or your dog gets in under you? Doesn't matter how well you stand on one leg if you can't actually move that leg when you're tripping and falling.
So I think, John, for people that are listening, and I think that you just gave us a really good kind of mindset shift there. But what would you say is the biggest mindset shift for maybe someone who is caring for a parent or a spouse that helps them kind of makes the biggest difference in preventing those falls at home?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think obviously we want to address home safety. So if this is a person that is getting down, requiring a little bit of help to get up and down from a toilet or from a chair, okay, well, can we find a way to, if we can't get stronger overnight, which is going to take time. So hopefully in the background, we're working on that process of getting stronger, improving our fitness and improving our balance. In the meantime, we do want to try and address some environmental concerns. So maybe can we move up a little bit in our chair? Obviously, I'm not a fan of lift recliners because people get lift recliners and then they never stand up on their own again. But can you put a pillow under their butt to make it a little bit easier? Can we make sure, and we're just thinking about common things that someone's going to do throughout the course of the day. So can we make sure the path between their bed and the bathroom is number one, well lit, especially at night? Do they have some motion detecting lights that are going to come on? Number two, make sure there's no rug sticking up. Number three, make sure there's no clutter. And then even just something simple like in the bathroom. Do we need a raised toilet seat? Do we need a grab bar put in? Are we safe getting in and out of the shower or the bath? So when it comes to older adults who are already a fall risk, and we're not going to be able to get them stronger overnight, we do want to kind of manage these environmental things to be able to reduce that. And then, of course, this is more your side of things, but medications, hydration, all these other factors as well that can play a big role in someone's fall risk.
But thank you for unpacking that for our listeners. You do focus a lot in your videos on patterns versus checklists. How can families start noticing these patterns in their own home?
Yeah, I think there's a few big things that people can pay attention to. The most obvious one that I always come back to is your ability, or if we're talking to family, a loved one's ability to stand up and down from a chair, recliner, couch, or the toilet. Because when someone can't do that easily, they are going to run into problems, and it usually happens pretty quickly. Because if it takes a lot of effort to stand up, they're pushing off with their arms, they're leaning forwards. That's almost like a monumental task. It's like you or I doing a heavy squat. For them, it's just that getting off the toilet. And if you do that at night when you're fatigued, that can lead to problems. So number one, just someone's ability to get up and down from a surface. Number two, just watching out for how someone's walking. And this can actually be pretty obvious over time. You guys probably have noticed it as nurses yourselves, but just people being a lot more cautious, a lot more timid, taking tinier steps. So when those things start becoming an issue, especially inside a home where, it's pretty obvious if someone's just taking little small steps because they're really worried about falling and toppling over. And then third, just how someone does stairs. If they've been doing stairs smoothly for a while and all of a sudden they're scared to go down them, they're pulling on the handrail, going up them. They're always leading with the same foot and not very strong at that. All these kind of things are definitely pretty big indicators that something's going on and something needs to be addressed, because so many people fall down. I mentioned earlier 14 million adults, but they're not accidents. There's always these kind of precipitating events and markers that you can see in someone.
I think the numbers that you gave there are staggering, really. It's unbelievable that those are as high as they are, and quite, I mean, scary. I wanted to revisit something that you just said a second ago. John, you mentioned lift recliners. And I talk about this because I know for a fact my own stepmother has a lift recliner. And I know that there is some things that come with that as far as deconditioning. Can you touch on that just a little bit about why you don't like those lift recliners?
Yeah. Well, I don't like any recliners, and we can kind of just start with the recliner topic in general, because how the whole, I mean, make sure we come back to lift recliners if I forget that. But recliners in general, that's another one of the biggest shocking moments I had when I started home care physical therapy. And I just could not believe how many people just sit in their recliner all day long and barely get out of it. And it's kind of shocking that if I just walk down my street here in a neighborhood in Boston, probably, some percentage of these houses with adults over 65, that person has not gotten out of their recliner all day except to get food and to go to the bathroom. So it's just this bad process, a downward spiral that I see, where people spend time in their recliners in their 40s and their 50s, and then they retire. And then those recliner hours just start creeping up, whether that's maybe they retired and they figured they'd read a little bit more. So they do that in recliner, or they watch TV a little bit more, or they just stop going out as much. And those recliner hours just keep adding up, adding up, and adding up. So before you know it, and you guys have seen this, someone's in their recliner all day and then they're sleeping in it at night too. So it's just, even any chair, any couch, you can't get as comfortable and just lie back and hang out like you can in a recliner. It's just, I'm pretty certain that recliners have ruined a lot of people's legs over the years. And then when we talk about lift recliners, I think a lot of people get these because they're getting to that spot where they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker getting up. So the answer is like, okay, we'll get this lift recliner and this thing will just lift me up. But if you take that into the strength equation here, that's hundreds of repetitions where you're no longer doing a full squat, you're doing that top half of squat. So there are a few situations where they're useful. If someone really is no chance of getting stronger and they just need to be safe. But the problem I see is someone gets a lift recliner, they're in their 60s or early 70s, maybe they just had surgery, maybe some other reason, and then they never get rid of it. So the rest of their life, they're just cranking that thing up and popping right out of it. And if you're already not strength training, already spending too much time sitting around, already getting your legs getting weak, that's just like the cherry on top.
Yeah. 100%. Very well said. So I want to bring us to honesty for a moment, John, because, a lot of times caregivers, we're not always in the home with our parents or our siblings or whomever that it is that we're taking care of. And I've noticed this in my own experience going with my loved ones to the doctor or being part of their medical appointments. And lo and behold, they ask, have you had any falls
Mm,
recently or near falls? And inevitably, they absolutely say no. Or they downplay like what their actual abilities are, or inabilities are, better chosen word there. And it's because either they're afraid of losing their independence or they don't want to admit those types of things. So I'd like you to share with our listeners what advice you might have for someone who isn't being fully transparent about their fall history and their limitations and what that real world impact is on that information not being shared.
yeah. So I think the big thing here is that that person, that patient is worried what everyone else is going to think of them. Well, this person, if they're not using a cane, they need a cane. Or if they're on a cane, well, now they need a walker. Or if they're driving, I don't know if they should drive anymore because they are falling. Or maybe they shouldn't be going out as much. But I think the big thing is if that person's not honest, well, it's not really helping them at all. And it doesn't mean they have to change their life. If a fall is coming and they continue living the life they're living, they're probably going to fall, but they're probably also going to fall if they stop going out as much or changing their life. So I think the biggest thing is, number one, it would let that doctor put in a referral for outpatient physical therapy or even home care if they're homebound. But and then I think number two is just like, that's when something has to be done. Because if they have been falling or have been tripping and maybe haven't had a fall yet, well, number one, we should figure out what the reason is. Is it because they're weak? Is it because their reactive balance is poor? Is it because they're dizzy? Is it because their home environment has a bunch of fall risks? So number one, figuring out what's going on and addressing that. And then number two, obviously trying to get some kind of intervention going from the strength and conditioning balance side of things. So hopefully we can reduce their fall risk. But yeah, I mean, nothing's ever going to come good from hiding that. But also, I think that a lot of times, if someone else in the situation is paying attention, they should be able to pick up on that patient's kind of declining level of function and potentially increasing fall risk over the last few weeks, months, or what have you. And of course, I see that all the time where I walk into a patient's home and they say they're not using their cane because they don't need it and they haven't had any falls, even though I know they have had falls. And then what do you know, like 2 weeks later, they're back in the hospital because they fell again.
Right. Yeah. And it's an unfortunate thing that I think we see a lot in home care is that I think sometimes too, and this happens a lot. Lori and I fight this battle a lot, more specifically about safety versus necessity, right? Like, yeah, they get up from the couch and they walk to the door because they don't have a caregiver in the home or they don't have this, but they're not really safe to do that. And that's where a little bit of that questioning comes in. So I appreciate you kind of specifying those things because there is a big key difference between necessity and safety.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it can be tough to get through to these people because they've been doing one thing the same way for 20, 30, 40, 50 years or however long. And going to the doctor, well, what's their doctor going to tell them? They're probably not going to listen anyways. Or if they have me coming in, who's this little PT guy trying to tell me that I need to use my walker? So
Right.
a lot of that too is what I like to do is I'll have them do something challenging that shouldn't be that challenging. And then they realize they can't do it. So if it's someone who thinks they're totally fine on the stairs and they can't even do a step up on the bottom step, well, that's a little bit of an eye opener for them where, okay, this actually is a little challenging and maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was.
I like that. That's a really good that's a really good tip there. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you. We're kind of at the end of our threshold for part one here, John. We are going to be bringing you back for part two, but I just want to thank you so much for sharing a little bit about the why behind, your insight rather into the why behind fall prevention. I think it's really powerful and it helps us set the stage for those practical tools that we're about to dive into in part two.
Of course. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And if you're listening and this conversation is resonating, make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss part two. Share this episode with a caregiver, a family member, or anyone who needs these insights.
make sure that you are subscribed and getting notifications because part 2 of our discussion with the fall doc is coming up next time. And trust us, you'll want to stay in the hot seat for this.
And remember to stay curious, stay informed, and stay in the hot seat.